Hello and welcome to another episode of Sports Zone. This is Jersey Day at Sports Zone. We're kicking it off with the important stuff like we usually do. Studio 90, I'm joined by Aaron as usual, and a lot to get in. This past week was a fairly hectic one in the world of soccer. The Champions League quarterfinal ties were decided, so we now have our 4 semifinalists, and I think we'll just sort of step in and review some of those ties that happened. Probably the most marquee tie was Roma-Barcelona, where Barcelona took a 4-1 lead from home and then threw it away, Roma winning 3-0 at home to put themselves into the semifinals for the first time, I think, in their club's history. Aaron, so is this a bigger deal that Roma was able to overturn this deficit, or that Barca choked it away?
I think the fact that Roma were able to overturn that deficit after that first leg when it was 4-1, I think everybody counted them out. Everybody said there was no possible way that they could get through, but that away goal at Barcelona turned out to be very, very important. It's very important that they did get that goal to win 3-0. And I think they just came out in this game with just a completely different strategy, completely new mindset, and it worked. And I think it also showed how susceptible Barcelona can be defensively sometimes, I mean, Barcelona obviously so great going forward, but defensively they were completely in shambles versus Roma, and especially on that last corner kick, just letting Manolas open to score that goal. So I think it definitely showed how Roma, they changed strategically. They were able to overcome that, but I think it also showed how susceptible Barcelona could be at the back sometimes. And for a team that hadn't really lost a game in La Liga, it's very disappointing that they ended up exiting from the tournament.
It certainly is, and Roma now putting themselves in the semifinals. People are sort of talking about them like an underdog, but this is a team that's in third place in the Italian league. They've got quality players. Kostas Manolas is one of the highest demanded center backs in the world. Edin Dzeko got it done formerly with Manchester City. He's one of the better strikers in the world. They've got quality players. So it's not a scrubbed or like a minnow team, but it's certainly a team that hasn't had a lot of success in Europe, and against a team like Barcelona. So certainly that is interesting. The other big team in Spain, Real Madrid, almost pulled a Barcelona, if you will. They had a 3-0 aggregate lead against Juventus going back home and almost coughed it away, but a late controversial penalty from Cristiano Ronaldo was enough for them to advance 4-3 on aggregate. Aaron, sort of, what is your reaction to that game, especially Real Madrid, the struggles of the season, them being able to sort of seep through on the end? Do you think it was a just result?
Well, you mentioned Real Madrid has struggled this season, and the thing that they've been focusing on is the Champions League, so very important that they did end up going through. But it was very surprising to see them going 3-0 at Juventus and then coming back home to concede 3 goals. Juventus had a great game. Miran Mandzukic had an unbelievable game for Juventus, but that penalty call late, for me, it's not a penalty. I think that Lucas Vazquez is already going down, and there is contact there, but I don't think it was enough for a penalty kick. So for me, it was disappointing to see that because I wanted to see extra time and let the players decide the game. So it was disappointing that the ref ended up calling that penalty. But I mean, Real Madrid going forward in this tournament, they've got to be the favorite just because of the experience, winning the last 2 Champions League, and the talent they have. I definitely think Real Madrid, even though I don't think that was a penalty kick and maybe they shouldn't have ended up going through, I think they're still the favorites going forward.
It's certainly a very questionable call that ultimately led to Juventus' goalkeeper, Gianluigi Buffon, getting a red card. Wojciech Szczesny having to come off the bench cold to save a penalty, which is never easy. A lot of things, Juventus and Buffon, usually a very diplomatic character, was very critical of the official there. So a lot of controversy surrounding that tie, and I think you speak for all soccer fans that extra time was what that tie deserved, and it was unfortunate to see that robbed by a controversial decision. Another favorite, Manchester City, really laid an egg over 2 ties against Liverpool. They were beaten 5-1. Liverpool, that was their second and third time beating Manchester City this season. Aaron, do you think it was just a case of Liverpool is being a team that has Manchester City's number?
I definitely think Liverpool has sort of found a formula to beat Manchester City, and you got to give Jurgen Klopp, Liverpool's manager, a lot of credit in that. A lot of teams versus Manchester City, they're a very possession-based team, so they try to sit back and sort of absorb the pressure. But Liverpool really took it to them. They high-pressed them. They high-pressed their defense, and Manchester City weren't able to get the possession they usually want. And when you have a guy like Mohamed Salah, who's just able to score goals for fun, in that front three of Salah, Firmino, and Mane, I definitely think that Liverpool sort of found a formula to beat Manchester City, and they've had their number all season, and this definitely showed in that tie. So, even though Manchester City were the favorites, it's not surprising to me that Liverpool were able to beat them just because they had beaten them previously in the Premier League, and I think the style that they play and the strategy that Jurgen Klopp put out was definitely able to minimize, what Manchester City do best.
And sort of sticking with Manchester City before we talk about the quarterfinal tie, Manchester City, this was a team that was boasting that they could potentially win 4 trophies this year. Now with that Champions League exit, they have the Premier League title locked up. They've won the Carabao Cup, but they have been eliminated in the FA Cup, and they don't even reach the semifinals in the Champions League. What do you think the perception of this season should be for Manchester City?
Well, I still think it's successful just because they did end up winning the Premier League title. But, when Manchester City brought in Pep Guardiola, the goal was to win the Champions League. That's always been their goal from the moment that they started spending all this money, buying a lot of players. They wanted to win the Champions League. So I definitely think it's disappointing that they weren't able to reach the semifinals. And going forward, if they want to reach the levels that they've set out, they need to go farther into Champions League. They need to be able to get to the semifinals and the finals. So even though they did end up winning the Premier League title, still a successful season, but definitely disappointing that Pep Guardiola wasn't able to bring them to the semifinals.
It's certainly unfortunate, especially when you see some of the teams that are left. Maybe they would have really fancied themselves to win. The final tie, maybe not worth discussing, but Bayern Munich was able to sort of squeak by Sevilla to get themselves into the semifinals again. And the ties are Bayern Munich will play Real Madrid in the semifinals, and Roma will play Liverpool. And Aaron, just looking at sort of those ties, which one do you think is the more intriguing? And I know you mentioned Real Madrid is the favorite in the tournament, but do you think there's another team who potentially could be a team that could win the Champions League?
Well, obviously, out of the 4 teams, the 2 best teams are Real Madrid and Bayern Munich, and they do get drawn together. So definitely whoever comes out of that tie is going to be the favorite for the final. But look, Liverpool and Roma are still very good teams. They're teams that can possibly win the Champions League. So both these ties are going to be very intriguing, and I'm very interested to see who's going to come out in front.
Certainly. The Liverpool-Roma tie is very intriguing, especially Mohamed Salah playing against his old team. Now, over the weekend, scored his 40th goal of the season, so the subplots are plenty there, and it should be interesting to see how those sort of ties play out. We'll keep an eye over those on the last couple episodes of Sports Zone, but that's all the time we have for this edition of Studio 90. Stick around for more Sports Zone after this.